Hello and welcome to the newspapers. This is the show where we look at the regional newspapers around the country from Scotland to Brighton. My name is Mike Mendoza and I'm joined each week by Dominic Ponsford from the Press Gazette to discuss in detail the stories that are hitting the headlines in the regions. And welcome to you, sir.
Morning, Mike.
Nice to see you.
Yeah, it's good to be here.
Been a busy week?
Reading lots of newspapers. There's more than 1,000 local newspapers in the country.
Is it really?
Yeah, I have to read all of them every week for this show.
Just for this show?
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
What do you do the rest of the week?
Sleep.
As you should do, of course. Okay, so sort of diving, because we've got some pretty good stories this week. Not that we don't have good stories every week, but this one is from the Herald Group, certainly in the south of England. Air show called off as mark of respect. This, of course, is the Shoreham Air Show where there was that terrible disaster in 2015. 11 people lost their lives. It's now been decided not to go ahead in 2016, but they are saying 2017 it could go ahead again.
Yeah, so this is the front page on the Shoreham Herald, weekly newspaper in West Sussex, and obviously big news there. And big news, a big national story, really, isn't it? The Shoreham Air Show disaster. It's one of the biggest.
Made world news, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the biggest air disaster we've had in this country for a long time, and so perhaps not surprisingly, but the Shoreham Herald have got the story. It's not going to go ahead this year. Basically, they're saying because the accident report hasn't come back yet. We don't know for sure what caused it. It was a vintage jet, wasn't it, doing a loop-the-loop, crashed into the motorway, killing a number of spectators. And then the other thing they're saying is a mark of respect for the people who died. They're not going to do it this year. So you just wonder, I suppose, whether it will come back, because these air shows are inherently risky, aren't they?
Well, you have two successful air shows, of course, in the south. You have Eastbourne and Bournemouth, and both those, of course, are over the sea. And that's been recommended, of course, for Shoreham, but it wouldn't work for Shoreham. And
why is that? Because of the geography, you wouldn't be able to see what was going on.
Yeah, that's the number one. Number two, it's a charity event, and over £2 million has been given to RAFA so far from the proceeds of the show.
Yeah, and I guess all life involves an element of risk, doesn't it? So I think it would be a shame if it was to close, but you can see why. It's a difficult thing to organise, isn't it? Low-level aeronautics have got to be part of an air show, otherwise you wouldn't be able to see what was going on, and that's obviously carries an element of risk, and it's not the first air show disaster there's been, is it? It
is believed. This is the third one at Shoreham, but the first one's involved members of the public. What's been proposed, what was proposed, is if it did go ahead, they just had normal flying without any aerobatics or anything else, just as almost again a mark of respect, just virtually fly past.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea, is it? And that removes the element of risk, doesn't it? Yeah. You can understand why the organisers are being cautious.
Can the organisers be held responsible for this? It didn't land in the airfield; it landed on a road next to the airfield, which was awful. But then it's all down to the aircraft, isn't it? At the end of the day, not the actual air show organisers. They weren't flying the plane.
Yeah, I'm sure they've got the health and safety up to the max in terms of the rules and regulations of what should happen, and so it's whether it was doing something outside those rules. I guess the report will find out. The report will tell us whether or not they're to blame.
Okay, let's move on to the next story. We're sticking in the south this time. This is from the Argus in Brighton. Petition launched opposing Whitehawk's name change to Brighton City FC. Whitehawk, of course, played a cup game on TV recently, sadly knocked out. Their pitch leaves a lot to be desired, but that's non-league football for you, I suppose. It's a good old-fashioned football where you get muddy when you play.
Yeah,
but they want to change the name from Whitehawk to Brighton.
Yeah, I hadn't even really heard of Whitehawk FC until comparatively recently, and I'm from this part of the world. Obviously, Brighton Hove Albion are a massive club now, aren't they? And vying for the Premiership, and Whitehawk FC are kind of nipping at their coattails. And the owners, rich people who own this club in their wisdom, have decided they'd like to change it from Whitehawk, which is not something that a lot of people will have heard of, to Brighton City, which I think they think has got a bit more cachet. But the poor old supporters, or at least a group of the supporters, are saying, well, we've been trooping along here for 30, 40 years. The club's been going for 70 years. We rather like the name as it is. And I think what they're saying, which I guess you could understand, is that Whitehawk, as you know, is not the richest part of Brighton, shall we say. It's not, it's a big council estates there, and it's not got the it's not a reputation for being perhaps the most salubrious part of Brighton. So I guess for people who live there, you can see where they might quite like to keep the name White Hawk, and hopefully it'll bring a bit of glory to the area. But the owners think differently, don't they?
I think it's a bit unfair to sort of change the name from White Hawk. It is the area. It is established in that area. It's almost a snobbery attached, isn't it?
Yeah. And obviously Brighton and Hove Albion, the established club, aren't too keen either, because they don't want people to get confused. But I don't really see how far they're going to get with that. Because there's quite a lot of precedents, aren't there, for cities having more than one football club with the name of the city in it.
Yeah. Sorry, at the end of the day, White Hawk is where it is, and the club, regardless of the name, and the Albion is the Amex. I mean, you can't really confuse the two. So we get on to Wales now.
Yeah.
OK, Welsh local authorities paid out more than £5 million over the last 2 financial years for compensation payments.
Yeah, this is a cracking story here from Wales Online. They've really gone to town on it. It's come from the Taxpayers Alliance, who crop up in the papers all the time, pointing out waste. And they've done a Freedom of Information Act request, where so many of these good local stories come from. And they basically asked all the local authorities in the country for details of their compensation payments over the last couple of years. And the Welsh ones are absolutely fantastic. There's been 5.4 million paid out by Welsh councils over the last 2 years for compensation. And if you look at some of the claims, it's bonkers. There's a cyclist who received £375 from Newport Council after his face came into contact with stinging nettles on a footpath. So presumably the council was found to be at fault because it didn't trim back the stinging nettles. Yeah. The Blaenau Gwent council's payouts included more than 40,000 for someone who tripped over a curb. And someone else got £494 for damage to their car's bodywork after high winds blew a bin lid onto it. I think, and they go on. We've got someone who claimed £10,000. He was cleaning a camera on the back of a car and he fell over. Gwynedd paid more than 30.
I love this one.
Gwynedd paid more than £13,000 to someone who was asked to wash dishes, after which their hands were stinging and swelling. So, and maybe the best story, but we only get the headline, is that falling on a fridge. So someone claimed more than £9,000 because he alleged that unsupervised children fell onto a fridge, which caused the fridge to fall onto him or her. So crikey, I don't know what's going on, but it sounds like a good story there. So I guess the wider issue is this sort of claims culture, isn't it? And the fact that when lawyers get involved, and no-win, no-fee lawyers, it's often easier to settle one of these claims rather than argue out in court and start paying into loads of legal fees. Same thing newspapers have as well. When newspapers get sued for libel, they will settle that rather than get into a legal dispute, because you end up paying tens of thousands in legal fees. So it's kind of...
And mind you, most of that's covered by insurance, isn't it, anyway, most of these claims?
Yep.
The only problem is your premiums go up.
The premiums go up, yeah, so the poor old taxpayer ends up footing the bill. And,
I mean, it's also amazing, £200,000 paid in compensation to inmates at Cardiff Prison in the last 2 years.
I know, the poor lambs. I mean, well, mate, who knows what goes on? But a lot of it, you just think, well, it's life, isn't it? Maybe people need to be a bit more careful and maybe take stuff on the chin.
Oh, for the good old days. We've got time to get on the story before the break. Wolverhampton's new Cross Hospital cancer scandal. This comes from the Midlands Express and Star.
Yeah, well, it's a great paper, this, the Wolverhampton Express and Star, top-selling daily in the country. And they've got a really good exclusive here on an NHS whistleblower who's decided to be named in the paper after he's been cleared. And he's someone who, 4 years ago, he revealed that 55 patients have been given chemotherapy treatment which they didn't need. Which is an extremely serious thing, because obviously chemotherapy is very dangerous to your health on its own.
Yeah.
Now, for whatever reason, this happened, and the NHS and the local hospital trust, as is so often the case, instead of really targeting on what went wrong, they attacked this doctor, and they did 4 different inquiries into him. He kind of couldn't work. He's had all sorts of tribunals and disciplinaries, and now finally he's been cleared. They said he did the right thing, and the Wolverhampton Express and Star has really gone to town on this and said, let's not attack whistleblowers, because without whistleblowers, these people save lives. They've done a really good leader comment as well, and said if you look at like the Mid-Staffs NHS scandal, that terrible scandal a couple of years ago, if a whistleblower had blown the whistle then, hundreds of lives would have been saved. So sadly it's a story that we cover in Press Gazette a lot. Whistleblowers get targeted, the people who are revealing wrongdoing.
And the other sad thing, of course, is 4 years of continuous unfounded allegations being raised The guy has been accused of harassment and bullying or conducting audits and raising concerns. He said he has no sense of victory, even though he's had this problem for 4 years now.
Yeah, well, he's had a terrible punishment, hasn't he? And, this sort of thing makes other people think twice about blowing the whistle, and in law, and the government pays lip service to this, it says that whistleblowers are protected, but in practice, sadly, they're not. They get targeted and punished, and it's not really worth it for them.
It's actually interesting to have a survey sometime of whistleblowers and what trade they seem to be the majority in. NHS has a lot of whistleblowers. And moving on this time to, is this a Press Gazette story? This is about Charlie Hebdo. Tell us about this.
Yeah, there's a big story in Press Gazette, my title this week, which came from research by the website Spiked, which is a very big sort of freedom of speech website. And they basically now do an annual rankings of universities for free speech. Because universities nowadays are getting quite censorious, or students are, and they found that 32 universities around the country, various publications are banned from sale. This isn't from the universities, but this is from the students themselves and the students' unions. And the papers that they found that the papers that are most likely to be banned are the Daily Star and the Sun, which are banned from 28 universities, and that's mainly because of page 3, because the Daily Star still has pictures of topless ladies on page 3.
Well, the Sun stopped it.
The Sun stopped it, but they're still banned apparently in numerous papers and in numerous campuses. And then there's several campuses where the lads mags are banned, although lads mags are actually almost extinct now. They're pretty much extinct now, but so they're banned. They're banned anyway for the same reason: scantily clad ladies. And then
so how does Playboy keep going? That's one of the few magazines that's just gone from virtually strength to strength over the last 50-odd years.
Doesn't have? I don't think it has naked ladies in it anymore.
Really?
Yeah, I think it's rather.
Since I've seen it.
Yeah, I think it's rather a different magazine now. And this is slightly more interesting as well as the Charlie Hebdo, the French satirical magazine. That's banned on several campuses as well. Presumably because of it depicts the Prophet Muhammad in cartoon form, and that's quite a.
So what about Private Eye?
Quite a dicey thing to do.
Because Private Eye are very similar, aren't they, in their style?
They've never depicted the Prophet Muhammad, though. No, they've not done that.
It's all down to those, then.
So the interesting thing is basically these students' unions feel that it's demeaning to women to have scantily clad pictures in there. Personally, I'd side with Voltaire on this one. That I may not agree with what you do, but I would defend to the death your right to do it. And I think it's just interesting that students have this view. And obviously, there's student activists, and there's a No More Page 3 campaign. And it's had a lot of influence. But
Is this very much a feminist outlook on life? Do you think?
Well, it's mainly a feminist agenda, yeah, and then it's also the kind of the religious side of it as well with Charlie Hebdo. But
we've got a feminist story coming up a bit later as well. Let's go over to Scotland, and we got the Scotsman first. In fact, two similar stories. Well, two stories about Scotland. First one: Sturgeon urges Labour to reject Trident ahead of early vote.
Yeah, so
that's grabbing the Labour vote again, isn't it?
Yeah, well, so the Scotsman have got a good story, and this is the big story this week, isn't it? And it's going to be a big story over the next few months. Trident, whether or not we need to spend, whatever more than £100 billion on the Rolls Royce of independent nuclear deterrence, and so not surprisingly, the Scottish Nationalists are against this. They're against Trident, and Nicola Sturgeon said she's urged Labour to adopt an anti-Trident stance. So at some point there's going to be a vote in the Commons on this, and it's probably going to be a fairly close one if you look at the makeup of the columns and the fact that Scottish Nationalists have got 50 MPs now, and they've got a pretty strong voice on this. So it's going to be a really interesting issue that, and it's going to be a big talking point over the next few months.
It will be interesting to see when this does go to the vote, because they're going to get the 50 votes supporting Corbyn. I don't know how many other members of the Labour Party are in favour of rejecting Trident.
Labour Party is quite divided on it, isn't it?
They are.
But then there's a few Tories that are sceptical about it as well. So it's not a clear-cut party political issue.
OK, let's move on. Staying in Scotland, this is from the Daily Record. Nicola Sturgeon again hits the news by spending £35,000 on helicopter flights in the last week of general election. Who pays for that?
Well, the people who contribute to the SNP's electoral campaign, wherever they are, various individuals and perhaps companies and so on. But this was a big story sort of around the country this week, the Electoral Reform Society published all the expenses on the campaign, and so there's been lots of stories about this, and the Daily Record have got some good coverage on it. Nicola Sturgeon spent 38 grand on helicopter flights. So, you know, I mean, it sounds like a lot of money, but then she did quite well, didn't she? So maybe it was money well spent. I mean, they got 50 MPs. The SNP actually spent 1.4 million overall. And if you look at the amount of MPs they got, that was actually quite good value because they did get 50 MPs compared to the Greens, who spent just over $1 million for one MP. And UKIP, I think, spent just over $1 million for one MP as well. The biggest spender, can you guess who the biggest spender was in the election?
Labour.
No, the Conservatives, 15.6 million. So, you know, a cynic might point out that the people that spent the most money also won the election, didn't they? What does that say about it?
It's a bit like buying votes in a way, I suppose people would say.
Yeah, exactly. And
It's all about it's high profile, though, isn't it? That's what they need.
Yeah, so they spent 15.6 million versus Labour on 12 million, Lib Dems on 3.5 million. So total of 40 million spent by the political parties campaigning, which is a lot of money, isn't it?
OK, moving on now to the Surrey Mirror, and Reigate MP Crispin Blunt outs himself as a popper user.
Yeah, I mean, I use poppers a lot at children's parties and stuff, but you know, they can go off your face, can't they?
Yeah.
But you know, Crispin Blunt's talking about something else. He's talking about alkyl nitrates, which are one of the drugs that are potentially can be made illegal when the government cracks down on legal highs, all these weird drugs that are out there. So it's quite a brave thing of him to do, really, isn't it? And Surrey Mirror have got it, their local MP, not the sort of thing you expect your local Conservative MP to come out in the Commons and say, I use poppers. I out myself as a popper user, and I will be directly affected by this legislation. And the backstory to it is that he's a gay man, and the Surrey Mirror has kind of been fairly careful in how they've written this, but gay men use alkyl nitrates as an aid to intimacy, shall we say? And he thinks that they're being discriminated against by this drug being made illegal. So it's quite a thing, isn't it? And how the world's changed.
OK, let's move on now to the South Wales Evening Post. Finally, West Wales Village sees first sunshine after 84 days of consecutive rain.
I know. Can I let you pronounce the name? It's got no vowels, but it's
that's what you do.
Yeah, Iglesias. I won't say it again. 84 days of rain in that Welsh village. So, wow, what a wet place that is. And so they were getting towards 84 days, and, you know, miserable as it was, they were thinking if they could just have 5 more days of rain, they would have the record for the wettest village in England. They thought, well, we could get some tourists come, you know, it would be worth it. Then, on the 85th day, the sun shone, so they couldn't even do that. So they're absolutely miserable over there. Sure. And so Tom Hazelden, who runs the local weather station, says things are changing compared to 20 years ago. We count the days with no rain rather than the rainy days, which is, you know, I guess, you know, global warming. We don't know, do we? But there seems to be a lot more rain, isn't it? And maybe it's a byproduct of the changing climate. We don't know.
Irish accent you did there, by the way. By the way, I lived in Queensland for a while, and they went 84 months with no rain. The other way around.
Well, sounds like a nice place to live. Yeah, I'll move there.
It was very hot. Actually, it was awful because the ground, you couldn't do anything in the garden because the ground was like that, like being an earthquake, just so dry.
Difficult to dig.
OK, this time we're off to Blackpool and the Blackpool Gazette. Shocking new figures reveal 83,000 Blackpool adults are overweight, and I don't even live there.
Yeah, I mean, I thought this was, you know, one of the most eye-catching regional press front pages of the week. Actually,
I like that.
Quite a brave one, wasn't it?
Did I post that one?
Yeah, So I mean, and they basically they're kind of like challenging the readers in Blackpool to you know, eat a few less cakes and maybe take a bit more exercise, because apparently 72% of the town's population is overweight. And you know, they're saying this is a, you know, major concern, major public health concern, and they're saying you know, one of the things it may be down to is too many fizzy drinks. And they've got a doctor there saying, you know, obesity is a serious public health problem for the town and contributes significantly to poor health. So I say, you know, good on the Blackpool Gazette for having quite a sort of forthright front page there.
There is a sudden downer on fizzy drinks, but it's not the fizzy drink; it's the sugar inside it, not the fizz.
Yeah. Well, there's the, you know, maybe we should ban sugar rather than poppers. Who knows?
Let's look at that in a way. Excuse me. OK, we're going down south again. This is the Argus and Churchill Square store. This has been the feminist in line here. Bow Avenue to remove lingerie mannequins doing laundry in their pants. What's wrong with that?
Well, there's been a complaint, you see. So you know, as you would expect in a lingerie shop, there are scantily clad mannequins there, so I don't think people object to that, but it's the fact that they're doing laundry, which someone called Miss Darby, who complained, said, you know, I understand sex sells, but this window displays a picture of women as sexualised domestic beings. I live in Kemp Town, walk past all these shops every day. This isn't about being prudish, but sexuality shouldn't be linked with domesticity. So she doesn't object to the scantily clad bit, but it's that she objects to the doing the washing bit. So and amazingly, the underwear campaign has scrapped the window display, and they said they're not going to roll it out nationwide. So it shows that shows you know how you can get.
This is a lady who lives in Kemp Town, where you have several shops along St James's Street, for example, selling men's underwear. What have you? Men are doing terrible things in there.
What are they doing in there?
I'll tell you about it later. But again, this is a national chain, by the way. Bow Avenue is a national chain, so that window display will be around the country. It's amazing. Brighton is the place they're going to complain about it. Well, that's all we've got time for today. Thanks for your company, and for me, Mike Mendoza and Dominic Ponsford, we'll see you again very soon. Bye for now.